Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce the release of my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. If you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level in 2021, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code positivehead. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Morsi here with me on the show. Myree is a soul guide and transformational therapist who, since 1999, has supported thousands of people on their spiritual journeys who are navigating their soul alignments, their personal healings, and kundalini awakenings. And super excited to have you here, Myree. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks so much, Brandon. I'm really joyous to be here.
I like that. I like that. I'm joyous. It makes me think of someone I met many years ago. That's what they went by, was the name Joyous.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
So I'm going to start with the same cliche opener I always start with, and it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I say my passion is supporting the awakening of this planet, and I'm very dedicated to my presence being a healing presence for others, and to inspire people that no matter how tough it is or wherever you are in your life, you can heal and you can awaken.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's talk about how you got to this place, how you started on this journey, because you've been at it for a while, and I always love to get some context in regards to backstory and whatever feels relevant to share. About your journey.
Sure thing. So I would say a lot of my influence in life direction came from my childhood in a way. It was a very challenging and adventurous childhood. There was a lot of very early childhood trauma. When I was one, my father had a acquired brain injury and rapidly developed schizophrenia, which was really
Wow.
a massive trauma for the whole family system, and that just kind of rolled forward, and by the time I was 4, our family system didn't really exist anymore. And so in that first few years there was kind of every kind of trauma you could imagine, including sexual trauma, and then I ended up living with my grandparents on their farm, which turned out to be an amazing blessing because I was allowed to be a wild child out there on that farm. It was 4 hours from a capital city in rural South Australia, and I just got to hang out in nature and climb trees and wander paddocks and ride horses. And in that time that I was with nature, what started to happen was gifts that I had had in other lifetimes, such as shamanic gifts and abilities to commune and to see, all started. I mean, they'd always been there really since I was a small child, but they began to have this space where they could unfold. And I just found myself having like audible conversations with nature, with trees and rocks, in that way that Indigenous people say that everything has a voice and a consciousness and that you can relate to everything. And I never thought anything of it. I just thought that that was normal, and that why didn't anyone do that? And there was a number of like really significant visitations. When I was 7, I had this very powerful visitation from Buddha. And I mean, I was 7 years old, living in white bread Australia. No one probably even knew what Buddha was, and we say that a bit differently in Australia. So, and it was very powerful, and I knew in that moment who it was, and I went out of my body up into. He was sort of hovering in the sky, and had this conversation with him, and he had two assistants who brought astrology, and we looked at astrology together, because he was kind of
Wow.
saying, I think you chose a too hard a life, Myree.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I think this
At
is
7?
at 7. It was wild. And he was in his rainbow body, which means it's surrounded by beautiful rainbow light, which, so all of this felt completely normal for me. And that was a very pivotal moment, because I had to make a choice about what I wanted to do. And I said, no, I'm going to continue. I'm going to stick this out, and I'm going to
Was it
stay.
sort of, I'm
Go.
sorry, was it sort of like a, hey, do you want to check out?
Yeah,
An
it was
exit,
like
exit?
exactly. It was like an exit strategy. They came to offer me an exit strategy because I was loaded with trauma that was going to, at some point in my life, explode, which it did. But in my
Wow.
innocence at 7, I said, no, I chose to come here to be compassionate, so I'm going to do it. So
Wow.
they said, okay, great. And then I came back down and continued with my life. And and then I went through school and had all those experiences you have when you're a highly sensitive person, going to a high school, and um, not fitting in and not fitting in, and being smart was difficult. And then I was graduated and was able to go into my own life. And when I was 17, I won this scholarship to go to Europe. And so I went to Europe on this scholarship. And when I was in Europe, and this is in 1989, right? No internet, no, I didn't even know where to find a book on this. I started seeing past lives really intensely, and I would go and visit places like the Rock of Cashel in Ireland and stand there and feel like, oh, I have stood in this place before, and feeling the winds of
Wow.
time, and Paris and places like that. It was like I was going on this journey, visiting all these places unconsciously that I had lived before. And from that point on, my gifts slowly started to, I would say, alchemize. And that led me to, in my mid-20s, living in a kind of meditation center, meditating a lot. And at that point in time, I didn't realize that much meditation is going to activate what they call your cities or your psychic gifts. And from that point on, when I was 25, it was on for young and old. Like, I could see the other realms, other lifetimes. And at 25, that was pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Wow. What a wild journey. You just I'm really curious about the
Yeah.
Buddha experience
Yeah,
at
yeah, go
7.
for it. Yeah.
So you were having this experience connecting with Buddha, and it was sort
Yeah.
of like expanded awareness of who the Buddha was, and
Yeah.
everything came to you in that
Yeah.
moment, even though you're this young person in Australia, where, like you mentioned, Buddha isn't probably the first thing you're taught in the first 7 years,
No.
Buddhism or anything. So, did you come back afterwards talking about the experience, or was it something that you kept to yourself? Or
No, I didn't. So when I made that decision and sort of completed that interaction, which felt very beautiful and natural, and it was like I made a decision with the Buddha. And so it was like that decision was very firm. It was like not to be changed. And I think at that time, like, I really did spend a lot of my time alone. And like, I would come in at the end of the day and check in and have dinner with my grandparents, but they were very busy. So I don't necessarily think anyone even asked what I was up to
yeah,
during the day. So I think that was partly what kept me safe, is I just really I didn't speak much back then. I was very quiet.
wow. What an interesting. And then, so now you're mid-20s. You were having lots of past life recall and recollection. And how did that appear to you? Is it in visual? Was it like clairvoyance, claircognizance? Like, what was the sort
I
of mechanism?
Yeah, it was a combination of channels. For example, when I was in Egypt, I'm half Egyptian.
Mm.
I had a lot of liminal experiences, I would say. But one of the experiences that I had was going to the Pyramid of Giza. And back in those days in the 80s, you couldn't do what you can do. You couldn't do now, I don't think, what you could do back then, which is you could just kind of walk into all of these places. And so my cousin
Mm-hmm.
and I went into the big Pyramid of Giza, and you could walk down these steps right down into the chamber in the center, and there's a kind of slab in the middle, and you can walk around it. And as I was walking down those steps, I was overwhelmed by what felt to me as like a magnetic pressure of the building itself, and probably
Mm.
all the ceremony that had happened in it. And when I got down to the bottom, it was like the sacred geometry and the sacred space of the building and all of the mystical arts that had happened in there activated my psychic gifts, and my third eye opened up almost like I was looking at 7 screens all at once.
Wow.
And each screen had something different going on in it. And that was a new experience for me. And I remember we both came out, my cousin and I, and Matt and I, and we sat on the side of the pyramid breathing really hard because something really powerful had happened in that chamber to both of us. And I remember just sitting there feeling and knowing and seeing that I had had all of these experiences before.
Quite intense for someone who did. It wasn't even. Were you really seeking to open up your gifts and things? No.
No, not at all. I didn't know anyone who was psychic, or I didn't know anyone that was a healer. I was really very innocent, and I hadn't even read a book about it.
Wow. Wow. So that really, I assume, just led you. That was the beginning of your path where you started navigating, these realms yourself and helping others to do the same. And yeah, maybe you can tell us. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that's looked like. Supporting people on their spiritual journeys over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off first being a healer and working with spirits. So the other thing I didn't mention is as my gifts started to come online, especially in the late 90s, a lot of support started to come in to help me because I needed a lot of support. And I had a very clear message from from Archangel Gabriel, actually, that I had a lot of work to offer on this planet. But first of all, I had a lot of work to do on myself. So really,
Right.
before I started working with anyone else, I just worked on myself solidly for a number of years. And then I started working as a healer, doing spiritual and energetic healing. And then a few years into that, I realized a lot of people were starting to come to me with very hardcore trauma, and I decided to go and get trauma therapy training. So I began that in 2005, and I've been working in this kind of intersection between spirituality, trauma, and awakening.
Mm.
And so when someone comes to me to have support, we sort of talk about what might be going on for them, but at the same time that they're talking, I'm watching their aura and I'm watching their body and their chakras and their energy system to see the way what they're speaking about aligns and registers and shows up in their physical body, because often, their subtle body and their energy system, because often you might have this particular problem, but there can be something profoundly energetic that's going on that's like an extra element that is actually exacerbating the issue. It's kind of a way of weaving together kind of trauma-informed understanding of the way our injuries code in us, but also the different ways that we can be affected energetically and at a soul level. And that might, include, initiating a soul retrieval for somebody, clearing things. Sometimes we pick up very unattractive kinds of energies that we don't want to have in our system. And the other kind of work that I do and I specialized in was supporting people going through different kinds of awakening journeys and kundalini awakening, because I've been through that journey myself. My own kundalini awakening ended in 2009 and thankfully integrated really beautifully. But that process of awakening and kundalini awakening can be terrifying and confusing for people. Can send them to the ER department because they think that they're dying. It can make people suicidal and fear that they'll never be able to live their life in a normal way again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear what your Kundalini awakening was like. And, I know it can be different for different people. And I've certainly had some people on that have, shared some of their experiences in the past. But I'd love to hear from you, about your Kundalini awakening.
Sure. I don't know exactly when my kundalini awakens. Some people come in with it sort of on a kind of simmer from apart from previous incarnations. And I think I was definitely one of those people. And then it just was kind of in the background. And when I did all of that meditation at 25, it started to like really kick it on. But it wasn't problematic at that point in time. It was just in the background. And then in 2004, I had this intense experience of a visitation of a spiritual teacher, and there was a transmission in that visitation that switched it on and fully activated it. And I would say from 2005 6 until 2009 it was very, very intense, because that was a period of time where everything Buddha had wisely said to me, watch out, Myree. You've got a mother load in there. Maybe you want to try again. And it all came up. Everything came up in that 4 years. And so I had acute PTSD, complex early childhood PTSD. And that had been triggered by an external event that was just the right energy to take the lid off my Pandora's box. And then Kundalini started to work through it and massage it out in a way which was her purpose, to kind of free and purify us of the trauma. But when I first started, I didn't know that I could regulate that Kundalini process, and I didn't know that I could slow it down. So I really did high speed trauma purification Kundalini, which I would not recommend to anyone to do, because it was like 24 hours a day dedication for a number of years. And then in that process, I started to learn how to calm the Kundalini down to some extent, and I started to teach my body my nervous system, because my nervous system was so trigger happy that even when I started to experience states of expansion and awakening and really big gaps of consciousness and bliss, that's kind of like the prize for the hardcore journey, I couldn't sustain them, because anytime I started to fall into that space of awareness, my nervous system would pull me out again. So I did this training where I trained my nervous system every day. I'd just sit and I'd feel the quiet and the bliss and the awareness. And I teach my nervous system that it was okay. And then over time, that seemed to build this capacity in my body to accept awakening. And then in the last few months of the Kundalini journey, it was going so fast. And this is quite a common experience towards the end, that the speed of the Kundalini whirling through my body and into my aura was so fast that it sounded like a Concorde jet plane about to take off.
Wow.
And I've heard people describe it almost like an energetic hurricane. It's like a vortex getting ready to complete. And then in February 2009, I felt really exhausted one night, and I thought, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I have to go home, feed the dog, and go to bed, which is what I did. And it was like something was collapsing inside me, but not in a bad way. It felt fine. And then I just simply woke up the next morning, and my identity at that point in time had completely fallen away, and there was just silence and that recognition that you have at that point in time that everything you thought was important was kind of hilarious.
Wow.
And so then that took a period of time to integrate, and for the physical body to be able to handle making that kind of, I suppose, like a quantum jump, like a reference point shift, so that you can you can start to stabilize in that awakened consciousness, and then it becomes very ordinary and very background. It just becomes this kind of ground of your life. And you're still a person, right? With all of the things that happen as a person, but you have access to something else as well.
Very, very interesting. So for those who maybe don't know much about Kundalini or think they might be experiencing it as well, maybe you could just speak a little bit to your understanding of what it is, and then speak to how people know when they're beginning to experience a Kundalini awakening.
Yes. So first of all, maybe what is Kundalini and awakening? So Kundalini is a sacred energy that's dormant. For most people, it's dormant in the root chakra. For men, it's the perineum. For women, it's the cervix. And most of us come in this life, and the Kundalini is asleep, and it's represented in Vedic literature by a snake coiled 3.5 times around itself, and the snake is asleep. And then as you go through your life, you may go through your entire life and it never activates. And for those people, they tend to be more sort of materially orientated, more interested in and perceiving themselves as a logical material being. And then at some point in time, there'll be a certain activation of that Kundalini if it's your destiny or your grace to have that activated, and that energy will begin to move through the body. And sometimes it's a really sudden activation, and you can get a big rush of the energy from the base of the body all the way through. Sometimes it may even penetrate and release out the top of the head and give you this like very big expansion experience. Other times it might reach the heart, and then it tends to drop back down and begin to bubble through the body. And you think of Kundalini as consciousness, love, awareness, and healing. And she's very beautiful and very loving and very healing, but it doesn't always feel like that. And there are a number of reasons why that's the case. And for some people, I just want to add, it can be top down, right? It can start with the consciousness of the divine coming down and descending onto the head and going that way. How do you know if you have a Kundalini awakening? That is such a vast question, but I'll see what I can do to sum it up. The most common symptoms people experience are energy moving or running through the body, electricity, feelings of hot and cold, heart palpitations. You can get a lot of heart symptoms because the heart awakening can happen very quickly. In the early stages of the Kundalini, there's a process which is basically a purification of fear. And the first thing that starts to leave your system is fear. And so people can get very anxious, terrified, insomnia. So there can be a lot of like very intense, obvious symptoms. And most people at that point in time will go to the doctor, which is good. Yeah, go to the doctor and get everything checked out. Make sure that there isn't anything physically wrong. And then if you come back as a clean sheet, and so many people email me and they say this, I went to the ER, I had every test, I had an ECT, I had an EKG, and nothing was wrong with me. And most people find that they've got a Kundalini awakening from the doctor called Google, and they put their symptoms, array of symptoms, in Dr. Google, and Dr. Google comes back and says Kundalini. And the other end of the process is it can be very, very subtle, and you maybe can barely tell you have Kundalini. And it just might be these very subtle signals or feelings of something bubbling there in the background.
Right. Yeah, it seems like, it's one of those things that would make sense with the awakening that's happening on the planet, that more people would be experiencing it. I mean, is that what you've noticed?
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And your podcast is in service to that. So thank you. So there is an absolute, I would say, wildfire of Kundalini awakening happening on the planet. So awakening is the elevation and rising of consciousness, and you can awaken without Kundalini to some extent. But the real sort of driving shift is often the Kundalini process. And because so many people are turning to follow their spirituality and their heart and being a spiritual entrepreneur, or exploring psychedelic medicines and yoga and meditation. This explosion of different ways of sort of unfolding your spirit in a way is inadvertently and spontaneously activating people's kundalini. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing with that is that the consciousness on this planet is rising faster and faster and faster, and that is making it much, much easier for us to kind of catch awakening from each other.
Interesting. Yeah. It obviously plant medicines and psychedelics and things have become such a you know, popular, common, decriminalization is happening, and so I'm curious. I know with those sorts of things, they can also set off, maybe premature awakenings or difficult awakenings. So, what your thought is pertaining to that? For example, I can think of my own journey with plant medicines, and I've definitely done my share of exploring those realms, and not as much in recent years, but the most it's interesting for me. I did ayahuasca it's been a few years ago now, probably three years, if I had to guess, maybe longer. And I had, I never felt like I necessarily have had a Kundalini awakening, other than naming my band that many years ago and being in a band called Kundalini.
Did you really?
I had a band called Kundalini for 8 years. That's how I came from the East Coast to the West Coast, where I am currently with my band. And yeah, but my last ayahuasca journey I had, where it was just, and I've done it, I think 6 times, and that was the last. And it was just like energy coursing through my body. Like I couldn't contain it. I literally just like thrashed for hours and hours and hours. And funny enough, as you mentioned, fear, coming up. That's what I literally, in that journey, the Aya journeys up to that point, a lot of times fears would come up for me, like, irrational fears a lot of times, something awful happening to my child or loved one or whatever. And I would sort of avoid them. And my friend who led the Aya journeys was like, the best thing you can do is to really just go in and face whatever's coming up and stay down, stay with the blindfold on, stay down. So I did that on this journey. And that's when it, just led to, uncontrollable energy going through my body as I sort of faced all these fears and accepted them and embraced them and welcomed them in that state. And then what I've noticed is, ever since then, the few times I've used psychedelic substances, not Aya, but like psilocybin mushrooms or LSD. The few times I've done that with LSD, it's the same thing happens again. It's almost like it opens up. Whereas before I was very skilled navigating those realms and, easy breezy. I did it, a little over a year ago, and with a bunch of other people, and everyone else is just fine and having a great time. And I shook for 8 hours, similarly to what had happened on the Aya journey. And so I don't know if it had just like sort of triggered something that, I haven't went back and tried again since, because it's a challenging experience. It feels like being plugged into a light socket or something.
Yeah. Did the energy feel like it was coming up or down or from the core? What was the experience? Did it have a direction?
Not that I recall. It's been a while ago now. It just felt just pervasive,
Yeah.
Like I don't, it's both experience, all the experiences. I actually used something other than I a few times, and both times was shaking like that, and but if I think back, I don't really recall anything directionally, so to speak.
Yeah, so you're definitely having some big spiritual cooking there, and it could be the kundalini. That's a very beautiful description of how kundalini can work, is that this kind of surging and movement of the energy through all of the different places and tissues in the body where you've stored trauma and fear and any sort of contraction. And it doesn't even have to belong to you. It can be your ancestors and your genetics and your culture. That all of that is going to be moved. And that's really interesting. And so in a sense, I would say you're probably really on a verge of of some really significant shift that's trying to happen there with the way the energy is moving through the body. And it's not fun. And I think that what you're describing in that kind of experience is what can happen for people, like that they can have the kundalini activated in a psychedelic experience, but that experience you described doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like for you, you're really blessed that the medicine faded in its efficacy and then you return to normal. But for some people, and I'm sure there's people out there who've had this experience that are listening to this podcast, that you have the psychedelic experience and it activates to some extent the kundalini, or to a huge extent. Sometimes the medicine can cause what's called a blowout, where the kundalini blows all the way through the system. Basically, it blows all the gates open.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the experience, the kundalini remains, well, it's activated. There is no off switch for it. Once she's on, she's on. It's a one-way train ticket. But you can decide how fast the train goes, right? You can. I prefer a slow train to China myself.
Yeah. Right.
Where you can like sit in the train and enjoy the journey more, rather than, you know, a Japanese express train to the end that's completely terrifying.
Right.
But what can happen with psychedelics is that an awakening, and I wanted to speak about this because it's not spoken about, and I think it's important to get this message out there, is that plant medicine, and I love plant medicine, and I'm a real fan of its capacity to transform trauma, and I watch it do amazing things for physical and traumatic pain. So I want to say that when it interacts with kundalini, sometimes what happens is that when you take a plant medicine, it's like an initiation. Would you say, Brandon? It's like an initiation. You start to have this relationship with the medicine, and the deva of the medicine is devoted to you, right? She's becomes devoted to your evolution, your spiritual evolution. And these medicines are spiritual activants. They're catalysts for spiritual awakening. And what can happen after you finish taking the medicine and the kundalini is active is it's almost like you can imagine the deva standing behind you, telling the system to keep waking up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Yeah.
But the system is already awake. So kundalini goes, oh, wake up more, wake up more, wake up more, wake up more. And so she keeps overdrive. She goes into overdrive. And you get this kind of difficult interaction between the kundalini and the deva, or the medicine, and the way the medicine is encouraging the kundalini to continue to kind of hyperdrive in a way. And what needs to happen when someone's kundalini activates is it needs to drop down again, right? It goes up in a big eruption, and then it needs to sink back down and just gradually bubble through the system. And so I come across a lot of people online, in my inbox, who are having these kind of experiences and are completely terrified. Or maybe the kundalini has kind of regulated a little bit, but it can't like fully settle and organize so that you can have a more easeful journey, because the medicine is in the background overstimulating the process.
Interesting. So something to be aware of with taking any plant medicine or entheogen or psychedelic is you may get more than you bargained for.
Exactly.
You know, that 6 hour or whatever, you know, might turn into 6 years. I actually think of a friend who listens to this show. I haven't talked to her in a few months, but she had, you know, a kundalini awakening that she kind of like you're describing, she just couldn't shut it off, you know, and she had a lot of like it's just super intense, and it just, you know, constantly is sort of having its way with her, and it hasn't been an easy journey, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's why, in a way, I sometimes think working with people who, like your friend, have a really difficult time, and having so much compassion, like seeing how hard it is and how painful it is. I sometimes think that, you know, our yoga and meditation and psychedelic medicines should come with a little label that says, warning, this may cause kundalini awakening, so people can make a conscious decision. Oh yeah, I'm up for that. And because some people might say, actually, I've got 2 kids, a job, and a mortgage. I can't do that right now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Before we continue on with today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to share an exciting new development in my world that can benefit those of you who are ready to get out there and travel. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, at some point you've most likely heard me talk about my personal hero's journey tale regarding the fastest growing private travel company I co founded that imploded back in 2015. Well, out of the ashes of that challenging lesson, my brother and I started a new travel company called Hello Vacay, and an exciting new chapter has just unfolded in my travel company saga as Hello Vacay recently secured a huge partnership with the world's largest online travel agency, Priceline. Essentially, due to our past success working with them all those years ago, they have agreed to give us access to their deeply discounted private wholesale booking rates. Our new site, hellovacay.com, is sort of like the Costco for hotel and alternate accommodations because it allows anyone to get access to these wholesale rates, which are up to 50% off the normal booking rates you'll find on all the other major online travel sites. The only caveat is that Priceline won't let us display these rates publicly because they're so much lower than even what you would see at Priceline.com. So to offer them, they insisted that we have a paid membership for people to get access to these much lower rates. And we have decided to give you all a free 1-year membership, which is currently $99 a year and most likely going to go up in price in the future. All we ask in return to redeem this $99 valued free year membership is to help us get the word out by taking 2 seconds to reshare a post about our launch on social media. Once you're a member, you will see that the discounts vary from city to city and season to season, but if you're traveling with any regularity, your savings will easily add up to hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year. I personally saved over $200 in one weekend when I went to Seattle not too long ago. Also, I'm honestly not sure how long my brother and partner will agree to allow me to run this free year offer. He's already changed it a few times on me, so if you plan to travel at all in the coming year, be sure to go to hellovacay.com/free year where you can easily reshare our launch post and then sign up to take advantage and get free access to wholesale travel booking rates while we're still offering it. That's spelled HELLOVACAY.com/free year. Journey well, everyone. Well, let's talk about the definition of healer. I know that you have a passion about correcting the definition of the healer. And I'd love to hear about that.
One of my passions is reconnecting people with the healer within themselves, because I believe that inside all of us is a healer and that we are all capable of healing ourselves quite extensively and probably beyond anything that you imagine. And we live in a culture where the word healer for hundreds of years has been really damaged and distorted. And but it's an archetype, right? And a really important archetype in our pantheon of archetypes. And that the energy and the essence of the healer within us is often pure love. And when I support people to reconnect with the healer within themselves, it's like giving themselves back who they are again. And it's so beautiful and moving. And recently I was supporting a woman and she said, I feel like I'm a healer. I know I'm a healer, but I have no idea what that means and is. And so we just sat with and felt into and supported her to connect to that, the healing energy, which had been so dissociated, it was actually outside of her body. And we slowly allowed it to her to reconnect and bring that healing energy and consciousness and knowing that she had back into her body. And as she did that, there was just tears streaming down her face. It was like a homecoming. And she said, oh my goodness, for the first time in my life, I don't need love from anyone else because it's all inside me. And there's this like power and wisdom and capacity to heal. And so we can see why cultures over time have really disavowed that role and made people feel ashamed to say, I want to be a healer or I'm a healer. And to give that back to people is really to give them back the power to transform their life. And everyone's entitled to have that power. The other thing I feel strongly about is that because of Hollywood, and I love Hollywood, but we have these really extreme ideas about what it is to be a healer, right? I have to like see ghosts and spirits and angels, and I have to be clairvoyant and read auras and hear messages. And so we have these like really extreme and seemingly impossible ideas of being a healer. And I want to say to you out there, you don't need to do any of those things. You just need to have a willing heart and an openness and a curiosity to explore. And there are many, many ways you can heal yourself that don't require any of those gifts and abilities.
Yeah, I think that is important. And, when I think of a healer, I think in terms of someone who is creating the space to allow someone to heal themselves, creating a container that, it's, and you think of Jesus and his healing. It's like, first you need to believe, right?
Yeah.
You get into that state of like, or I even think of, what's the magician's name? He did an incredible documentary or show on Netflix. Darren Brown is his name, actually. And I highly recommend it. I could look it up here in a second. But he talks about faith healing and, all this stuff. And he sort of, he was mocking it a little bit, because he's talking about how he basically was mocking it on one hand and then doing it on the other, showing how he could create the container in this case, his act to allow someone to suspend disbelief long enough to go from wearing glasses to read the thing to taking the glasses off and still being able to read, and some of these things. And it's just really interesting to start to consider, hey, it's within all of us. And if someone has the right, permission slips, as Bashar kind of puts them, which I love, then it then allows us to step into that state of, where we can shift reality in a sense. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I love that analogy, and I think that that's really true. And I deeply agree with what you're saying, that a good healer holds a frequency and a permission and a space that allows you to drop your limitations and your limited sense of who you are, and allow you to expand into more of what you really are. And that in that process, in that shift, that's where things fall away, and that's where doorways to healing and new possibility and perspective of yourself and future live.
Yeah. Okay, so I just looked it up. Darren Brown, and it's called Miracle on Netflix, and really, really good. Highly recommend it if someone wants to check that out. But this has been fascinating, Myree, as we kind of continue to explore, a few other things, topics that I would love to touch on is, I know you are able to tune into spirit and have had a lot of those experiences your whole life. And I'm curious your thoughts on the idea of spirit team. And, I know you also have the ability to help people connect with their spirit team. And I'd love anything that you want to share about that, how I could help connect to mine or those listening, all of that.
Yeah, sure.
I think that was like 3 questions in one.
All right, let's dive into them. And if I leave off a question, just hold me to it. So, yes, there are many realms of levels of consciousness that we can receive support from, and they're available to all of us. And even in this moment, to anyone listening and to Brandon and myself, there are the ones we traditionally know, such as spirit guides and angels. And spirit guides being people that have lived before and in between incarnations decide to come back and be a guide and assist, or they may complete their incarnations and continue to come back and assist in that way. And then we have obviously angels, which we know a lot about from Christianity and other religions. And then there are realms beyond that of amazing support there are beings from other dimensions that have never had any kind of physical form, and groups of beings. We know some really famous ones of those who never really take physical form. They're more kind of nebulous. And And then there are starry beings that are amazingly specialist in all sorts of things, such as the evolution of the human system in the process of awakening, or particular kinds of spiritual protection, or helping you to really hone or expand unique gifts you have or passions in your life. So for me, working with spirit is the biggest delight of my life, and makes every day kind of fun, interesting, and they help me get really gritty into challenges that I might be facing. And really, they have been why I saved myself. I've overcome a lot in my life, and I didn't do it alone. I had, of course, therapists and healers, but every single day, 24 hours a day, I had a spirit team. And it was a spirit team that processed that helped me to process the trauma out of my body and navigate the awakening. And they help me every single day, including showing up for this podcast. And everybody has the availability of that kind of spirit support. And even in this moment, it's around you, and you can even just take a moment and just say hello. You don't have to hear them, but they love to be engaged with and invited. And you can also build your own unique, very complex spirit teams that sort of can collaborate, beings across these many different levels, to come together with a specific focus and way that they want to engage and serve you in your life. For me, working with spirit is like, it's, you know how you have biohacking, like it's a real thing, like where you're trying to like extend your life and your being with all of these different sort of technologies to help you. For me, having a spirit team is like spirit hacking, and working with spirit to hack how to do something and make it easier, or how to learn something and make it easier, or how do I heal something to find freedom for my client or myself. And often my clients will present me with really challenging things, or ask me how they can resolve something, and on the spot, spirit will actually create something that's actually designed specifically for them. What were the other two questions?
Well, I think you might even have touched on them, and as far as how we can all, any techniques or anything to connect to our own spirit team. I know you said, look, you can just talk to them, which is great, right? That keeps it very, very simple. But is there any particular way to create a two-way communication?
Yeah.
Would be.
So that's something that I teach people, and it's important to know that your style of communicating with spirit is unique, right? And you have your own channels, and some people are visual, some people feel, some people have claircognizance, so they know, some people hear, and some people it's kind of like body sensations. So your spirit team will speak to you in the channel that's most available to us. And the only reason that we don't recognize our channels very well is that we've been conditioned not to recognize them, or we've kind of like squeezed them tight, closed, right? And so there's this process of slowly allowing those channels to kind of soften and open and get permission slips. So it's partly what it is like a lot of our awareness is tuned into the material world. Right, so I'm looking at Brandon. He's got an amazing, I don't know if you've seen it, Positive Heads, his amazing background he has behind him when he records. So I could like be very materially focused on that, or I could soften my awareness a little bit to just notice my channels at the same time. And it's that softening our awareness into our channels. That's the piece that's been left out. And it's just this like soft movement to connect with those subtle channels. So you have quite a crowd of friends behind you.
You're able to perceive my team.
Yeah, you've got like, I think it's also because you communicate with like thousands of people, right? So there's like quite a big posse behind there, and then there's a couple like standing, almost like they're like the bodyguards at the door or something. So we could just have a little play if you like.
I would love that.
All right. So we have this halo here around our head. Everyone's probably seen a Christian painting with a saint that's got that kind of golden aura around their head. That's actually a huge piece of spiritual technology. And So maybe, would you say, what's your strongest channel? Are you feeler, a knower, a seer, a
I think a knower.
You're a knower. Okay.
I would say claircognizance if
Is
I
your
relate
thing.
to
Yeah, I
things.
can see that. Yeah, very third eye. So why don't you just invite some of that crowd to come a bit closer? Yeah, beautiful. And you may have feelings as they come closer. They might be subtle feelings. Maybe just kind of take in a breath with that. And just allowing yourself to soften. And then you can also invite them just to kind of attune to your halo. And then, yeah, just letting your body, just going to let your body get used to that, because actually quite a lot of new energy coming into your third eye and then down to your heart. So just ask them to help your body to receive it. Yeah, there you're just relaxing now. And what's that like? Do you notice at this point?
Very quickly feels meditative, and yeah, I mean, without any like specific information, just like feeling like you feel when you're comforted in around, if you're in a small group of people or something that you know and love, and kind of got that sensation of just feeling.
Yeah, you look a little bit soft and blissed out there. Yeah. So what's happening? Yeah, and they've just come closer straight away with that. So let's play a little bit more. So you have a lot of people on your team that are here to support an awakening and enlightenment, and a lot of very awakened beings. And so that's their energy, and I can feel it pouring through now. And maybe we can invite it to pour through the podcast, right? That beautiful energy. Yeah, let's just enjoy it. This is the juice of Brandon's mission on this planet and his life. And just to enjoy that, like letting yourself soak in, so they're just transmitting to you. And the transmission is activating and this kind of capacity in your third eye to be in a state of wonder and your heart to hold it. And so again, we just let your body get used to attuning to it, because it's a thing where our body, it's like it just gets used to certain frequencies and energies, and oh, okay. And then
Very pleasant.
Very pleasant. One more thing, just to play. And then if you close your eyes and ask them if they have something that they want to communicate through that energy. There might be an image, an idea, a knowing.
The thing that instantly comes to mind was make the time to connect.
Yes. You like watching what's happening to you right now. It's like absolutely amazing. Like you have that, the transmission that they're sharing now that's in your third eye, between your third eye and your heart. That's like your mission, right? It's connecting these two people and in yourself. But you could connect to them before I want to cry, before you podcast and transmit that wherever you like, because wow, that's beautiful. That's why you're doing this amazing work.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I felt a little more disconnected lately, just with so many other things in my life, and the podcast has, I've been doing it for such a long time, and I have moments where it's like, okay, I mean, even today I was thinking like, I've said what I have to say many times, many ways, and I'll never not. And it's been like, just one of those things where it's like, for the first time ever, I've even considered like taking a break from it, just to, and just, because a lot of people do, okay, this season or whatever, and just to recharge that battery where there's that sense of excitement and deep transmission, which I think has probably honestly been less impactful in recent year or two than it has in previous years because of my own state and focus, And so what's great about this is it's such a quick way to tap into that, that energy, that supply, if you will, instead of feeling like, oh, I'm sort of running lower on fuel. It's like a way to tap into your team's energy and that bigger, like, don't forget the biggest part of this mission, and how really easy it is to just by making the time and setting the intention, even if it's 5 minutes of meditation or 10, whatever, 10 minutes of getting into that state. I think there's a lot that will come from that, is what I sense just in doing that. That's kind of what comes through for me. And
I would agree. And you're a natural, like, it's because of all your meditation, everything you've done, like your ability to tune, it's just like right there. And so you could ask them, because we get fatigued and life is intense at the moment. They can hold space for you and hold space for your podcast and actually cultivate the field for you, so that it doesn't have to run so much on your own energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting thing. I mean, for the first time ever, my numbers have always went up, 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 up. For the first time ever in the last few months, they've went down. And then I'm like, okay, why is that? Well, where's my energy been at? Oh, well, has my passion been there like it has? No, it's been, more of like, oh, I got to do it, as opposed to get to do it. At times, obviously I get into a conversation like this and I can get lit up and excited quickly, but it's not lost on me. And I think this is a great experience to have today, and of course synchronistically timed, because it's a great tool and a reminder of how I can, call on other resources because I know how important it is too, and how much difference it's made in so many people's lives. And the thought of that not being there, I don't love. So for whoever will find it next, or you know what I mean? So, and of course, always wanting to show up and be my best self and as much benefit to the world as possible. So yeah, it's a wonderful tool. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So as we sort of wind down here, I do love to hear stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story, and something tells me you would have probably lots of stories up your sleeve. Do you have any that feel present that you would like to share?
When I heard that you asked this question, because I listened to a couple of episodes, I was almost like, the paranormal is my normal in a way. So I was like,
yep.
What am I going to share? And I really couldn't think of what would be. And I've shared a few of them already, but this one came to me this morning over breakfast, and I thought, okay, I'll share this. I think because, after my Kundalini awakening, a few days afterwards, actually, there was these huge bushfires in Australia. You've probably heard about them, where almost a couple of hundred people died. And it was really the beginning of what they call these inferno fires. And I was living in one of those areas, but I was safe. I was like 10 Ks away. But a lot of people had perished, sadly, and but no one could get into those areas to find out. But Spirit said to me, and I just finished my Kundalini awakening, I was pretty fragile, and they said, you have to help. And they said, go into your healing room, and we're going to bring you people. And so I went into the healing room, and they started to bring people in one by one to kind of help release the trauma and the shock, and explain to them what had happened, and help them through the light. And towards the end, yes. And I didn't know any of these people. I said, and so they would just bring them in, like kind of escorting them into the room. And
would you see them phically? Would you?
I did. I had to ask them to show me them in their form before they had their fire injuries. So that I just started seeing them in their, like, their self before that happened. And these two people came into the room towards the end of, I did this over 2 days, and was a man holding a like a young sort of baby child, and then the mother was holding like a toddler, I would say. And
Mm-hmm.
she had a very distinctive sort of pretty but plain look that was unforgettable, and he was really angry and frustrated. And so I supported them and gave them flower essences and helped them to kind of come out of the shock process and help them through the light. And then there was another group that came in after that. And then groups of people started coming in. And there was this group of 6 to 8 people that came in. And they were kind of in a semicircle. And it was like 6 or 8 adults. And so I treated them all individually. And then I went to move them as a group. And they said no. And they pointed down to the ground. And I looked on the ground and there was a baby on the ground. So I was like, oh, okay, there's a baby here too. So we treated the baby and then helped them to all move through the light as well. And so I did about 40 people, and that was enough for me. I said, Spirit, that's enough. That is huge. I can't do anymore. And then a couple of days later, I was down at my osteopath, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and I picked up the Age newspaper, and I just opened it to page 3, and there on page 3 was a picture of the family, the man with the
Wow.
baby and the mother with the toddler. And the reason I realized why he was so angry was he had just installed an entire fire defense system, sprinkler system on the house. So he should have been
Cool.
protected. And I think he was so frustrated that he did everything right and he couldn't protect his family. And then, so there was just this like absolute affirmation of the reality of this kind of work. And then sometime later, I opened the Age again, and I remember I got such a shock from the perfect replica. And then the larger group with the baby, what happened was there was this very tiny article in the Age sometime later that a group of I can't remember that, it might have been 6 or 8 people, had been found, and they'd gone in a semicircle or a circle, and the baby was on the floor in the middle between them all.
Wow.
It's like they were protecting the baby with their physical bodies. And the reason, that was a very small story, there was no pictures because the damage from the fire was so extreme.
Wow.
And I think that those two experiences were extremely moving for me, and such affirmation from spirit of clarity and doing the right thing. And I think when you work in these realms, sometimes getting those kind of clarifications and affirmations is very, very important, because to do this work requires a lot of trust.
Yeah. Wow. That's what an intense thing to do. Helping to, when you were communicating with them, were they, you just talking to them in a way that was as clear as talking to me right now?
Yeah, and some of them were really in too much shock or trauma to really speak, but
Yeah.
but they didn't need to be able to speak, and then others could speak, but most, they were just pretty traumatized at that
And
point in
they
time.
were they aware that they had passed, or were you having to sort of explain that to them?
They were to some extent aware of that they were going to pass, because I think when you die in a fire like that, like you've done everything you can to get out, you've done everything you
Yeah.
can to protect
Yeah.
yourself, and then there's this realization that I'm not going to make it. And
Yeah.
so most of them had that awareness, but they couldn't believe it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one thing to know that something's going to happen, it's another thing to believe and accept it, and to accept where you are when your body has perished in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
when people go through traumatic and tragic deaths, it's really important to help them as soon as possible, because that shock state can keep them from not finding their way through very well.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so to get them support and get them out of the shock and into awareness, so that they can then receive the support. Because if you're not back in your awareness, you're in the shock, you don't see the support that's around you, that's trying to help you with these next steps. And also for the families that are left behind, of those loved ones, when they go through
Yeah.
the light, it's much more easeful for them.
Right. Right. Wow. What an intense thing to do. I mean, it's really intense when, I've heard of this sort of thing before, someone here helping someone there. And, um, I thought of it the other day because I had a friend recently who passed um, from an overdose, and just like the sweetest person,
Wow.
but just had a severe, and it was, yeah, it was wild. The amount of synchronicity around it, too. It's just like seeing the energy um, bubble up, in many ways, and it's just fascinating to think about, like, even in that state, they're on the other side, but yet they're sort of in a plane where they haven't fully gone, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these layers of experience there, and they're closer to human in some ways still than probably, most, I would guess.
Yeah, that's right. And it can take a while to transition, especially in situations of overdose where it's kind of accidental.
Yeah, right, right. What is the best way for people to connect with you who would like to continue, you know, getting access to your incredible wisdom and Myree medicine? What's the best way to do that?
Well, the Myree medicine, you can find me on www.myree.com.au. There's a whole lot of links in the show notes. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. And I also created something really special for the Positive Head community. If you feel inspired and you'd like to hang out with your spirit teams and kind of jive with spirit the way Brandon did, and see how they can love you up and play with you and heal you and give you insights and guidance, I created, just for Positive Heads, and I've never done this before, a spirit magic masterclass where you can
Ooh.
come and hang out with me. You're invited, Brandon. And you will play with your spirit teams, and we'll teach you some tips and steps so that you can commune and soak and high vibe in the love that they have to offer. So you won't find this invitation to this spirit magic class anywhere except in the show notes for this podcast. So if you go to the show notes and you click on the goodie bag for the show notes, there is a beautiful page there that will invite you into this class. It's on the 21st of August if you're in the United States, 22nd of August if you're in Australia, and Europe is somewhere in between those dates. And we will play together, and I want you to know that you're not alone, and that you can be supported, and that you can be nourished, and that you can receive insight, healing, and support at any point in time. So go to the show notes, click on the goodie bag, join me in this free masterclass, and on that goodie bag page, there's also some beautiful downloadable meditations that are there for you to receive as well. There's so much happening in my world. Check out my website, my courses. I also have coming up in October a spirit magic program. So if you want to learn some of these tools, if you want to up level and spirit hack your life and learn to heal yourself and others, come join me in Spirit Magic in October. And I love bringing spirit to you, and I hope through this podcast that you felt some of the energy of the support that's on the other side. If that is something you're going to walk away from this podcast and you realize that you can be loved and supported and uplifted by spirit, that they can support your awakening, then I've fulfilled my mission.
You are definitely doing it, and you're so inspiring and so joyous. As we started off talking about being joyous, you definitely are. And I do have one final question I would like to leave you with, my cliche closer, and it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to Myree Morsi?
Oh, wow. The meaning of life is to discover that you are infinite consciousness, and that infinite consciousness is expanding and spiraling through everything, and that you are not separate from the source of that consciousness. You're here to learn that you're a sovereign being and free as that consciousness, and able to unhook yourself from the things that limit you. And I just want to say to be freed of more suffering than what you imagine.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Myree. This has been such an awesome soul share, and all of you out there for tuning your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into this broadcast. Until next time, journey well, everyone. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code positivehead. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.